Hi guys, how are you all today morning? Good morning. Today is 16th December 2023. My name is TSV Raghavan and I live in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. This is my spiritual vlog on YouTube. HARDAN, 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 Haribol, TRSV, Nectar, NECTAR, Nectar. In this particular vlog, in all my previous videos, we have been trying to discuss about the knowledge and information that we have gleaned through the study of spiritual books, scriptures, contemplation on the material universe, and meditation on the spiritual universe. This particular video in this vlog is no exception to that rule. In fact, it is a mere continuation of all that we have been trying to do in all my previous videos. Kindly subscribe to this vlog and press the bell icon so that I may keep reminding you of all my previous, present, and future videos. So let us continue with the topic of discussion for today's video. In the past few videos, we have been trying to talk about and analyze in detail a particular term which is perennial to the psyche and life of every human living entity in this particular lifetime in this world, material world, and that includes both male and female human living entities. This particular term is known as mind. Mind is a subtle form of driving instrument of this particular chariot called the human living entity, whether male or female. Just like the three subtle bodies, namely the causal body of intelligence and logic, astral body of mind, feelings and emotions, and the etheric body of senses, namely sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. The mind is also made of the subtle element called ether. It can only be felt, but it cannot be seen with the naked eye of the gross body of a human living entity, whether male or female. The fourth layer of material body of a human living entity is called the gross body. there is one mass of tissue called brain which is safely embedded into the skull of this gross body. Mind and brain complement each other very well. Mind is the subtle form of the brain, and brain is the gross form of the mind. There is one another element called ego. This ego is of mainly three types. One is called the false ego, where the same human living entity, whether male or female, identifies with himself or herself and his or her body. The other is known as the real ego, where the same living entity starts identifying himself or herself with this individual spirit soul. On the other hand, the superego is where the same human living entity, whether male or female, identifies with his being just a part and parcel of the spirit whole or the super soul or the supreme personality of Godhead who is very much visible or not visible but present as the localized Paramatma or Kshirodakasai Vishnu inside every atom in this universe. Now, this ego, or mainly the false ego, is the main cement that glues the four layers of the material body of a human living entity with each other, and then they help link the individual spirit soul of that particular human living entity with these four layers of material body. These are information that we need to know before proceeding further in the analysis of this term called mind. Mind is the main driving instrument that drives that particular human living entity while he or she is alive in a lifetime in this material world. Without mind, the chariot known as the human living entity stops working, becomes redundant, and has only the value of scrap. In such a case, the gross body of the same human living entity drops to the terra firma, and the three subtle bodies, along with the ego and the mind, move into the ether where they were already existing as individual parts of the same living entity. They remain there till the next birth when the same human living entity dons a new gross body according to his or her destiny and prarabdha karma. Prarabdha karma is where a slice of sanchit karma which is stored in the superconscious memory of that human living entity, is taken out to be laid as a foundation for this particular living entity's particular birth. Sanchit karma is the storage of unworked karma of every human living entity. Now we know how or where what stands in the life of a human living entity. We have been trying to discuss various case histories to authenticate this particular theory about mind. In that process, we realized that in a society, in a particular lifetime, there are three major categories of human living entities. 75% of human living entities are in a vegetative state where they move around in a trance, hoping complacently that they have come into this world to enjoy life. The rest 25% have 20% who worship the dark negative forces of this material world and society, whereas 5% worship the positive material and spiritual forces that govern this society, and they are known as the cream de la cream of the society. While discussing about mind and various case histories, we are obliged to take into account the case history of every human living entity, whether he is from the positive state, the negative state, or the mundane state. Because 75% of the masses is mundane, so we do not have any special case history regarding that vegetative trance like mass of the society. However, there are enough case histories in the negative forces as well as the positive material and spiritual forces. We have discussed various case histories from the 5% positive category and bracket, but only now we are trying to make an exception by trying to analyze the case history of lives of those who hugged or gravitated towards the dark negative forces of this society. In this process, we are trying to analyze the mysterious life of one particular gentleman called Anthony Strollo, who belonged to the underworld of the New York Mafia in the early, mid, and late part of the 20th century in America. This Anthony Strollo was notorious with the name of Tony Bender in the same underworld where he was involved earnestly into crime and nefarious activities. Tony Bender one day suddenly vanished into thin air one night from his Staten Island residence in the year 1960 or 1962. We tried to analyze the reason of the sudden disappearance of this mysterious, suspicious, and scheming gangster called Tony Bender. In that process, we came across two characters known to be at loggerhead with each other. One of them was known as Lucky Luciano, who was the boss of the initial family to which Tony Bender belonged, and the second was called Vito Genovese, who was the acting boss of the same family. Tony Bender was under Vito Genovese with a person called Tommy Eboli acting as his immediate boss. We know by now how Lucky Luciano trapped Vito Genovese into getting sentenced in the Leavenworth State Penitentiary in America on a 15-year narcotics sentence. As soon as Vito Genovese landed as an inmate in that prison, he began thinking through his very sharp criminal mind as to what caused this particular bum rap to be fixed on him and his own associates. In that process, he ordered his own immediate junior, Tommy Eboli, to look around to find out who caused such a calamity in Vito Genovese's life. It was Tommy Eboli who told him that Lucky Luciano, Frank Costello, Meyer Lansky, and Abe Longy Zulman were against Vito Genovese, and in one of their plans they had happened to succeed in nailing Vito Genovese tight with his own associates and put into a 15-year sentence in Leavenworth prison. Vito Genovese got suspicious immediately. He was a very unscrupulous career criminal. He suspected everyone, including Tommy Eboli. But for the time being, he kept his suspicion on Tommy Eboli in the cupboard. Instead, he began suspecting none other than the mysterious, conniving, and suspicious Tony Bender of conniving with Lucky Luciano to nail Vito Genovese. He felt that it was Tony Bender who had tried to put him and his associates in prison so that he, Tony Bender, and Tommy Eboli could take over their working very lucrative business of crime through that family of theirs. Immediately after, Vito Genovese ordered Tommy Eboli to bump off all the underlings who were either not in the prison with Vito Genovese or could have been with Tony Bender in nailing Vito Genovese. Here we will take a detour. We have already talked that these are people who worshipped the dark negative forces of this material world. We know in this case history how a mind of a negative person works. As far as he or she is concerned, none except himself or herself is his or her friend. They do not trust anyone. Yesterday's best friend could become today's arch rival and deadly enemy. Till yesterday, for almost one generation, Tony Bender was close to Vito Genovese, but as soon as Vito Genovese landed in prison, he put a contract on the head of the same very trustworthy and close friend, Tony Bender. Tommy Eboli decided to do something about it. Tony Bender lived in a place called Staten Island in the New York State, which was a little away from the New York City where Tommy Eboli lived and operated. He assigned two of the underlings of their family to take care of Tommy Bender in his own residence in Staten Island instead of having him whacked or hit or killed in New York City. Tony Bender was by that time 70-year-old and was retired with his own children married off and settled elsewhere. Such a senior elderly person was about to be marked for death. One night, two underlings from Vito Genovese's family went to Staten Island, went to Tony Bender's house and accosted him. Because these two were an associate of Tony Bender for at least 20 years, Tony Bender did not suspect anything. He told his own elderly and aging wife that he wanted to go for a meeting with these two men that very cold night in Staten Island. Those two professional gangsters and killers whacked off Tony Bender and made his own body vanish in thin air. It is for the past 100 years, 75 years or so that Tony Bender's body has not yet been found. It is suspected that either his body was buried in Staten Island itself or was carried to the ocean and thrown into the ocean or the Hudson River in New York State. This is how the mind of criminals in this world works. As far as they are concerned, no one is their own, and that includes one of their best friends in their career of crime. This Vito Genovese was such a deadly guy that after he had bumped out several gangsters in the city during his imprisonment for suspecting them as police informers, he turned on his own associates in a prison. The main mobster who turned Vito Genovese towards was known as Joseph Valachi, and this was not only a surprise but also a shock. This Joseph Valachi had been sentenced to the same prison in Leavenworth by the court, and he was happily trying to serve his time along with Vito Genovese, Palermo, Lillo Carmine Galante, and Vincent the King Gigante, who were all fellow mobsters in the prison. However, thanks to this man called Palermo, Vito Genovese began suspecting none other than this Joseph Valachi, who had been earnestly devoted to the negative forces of the society and crime for almost all of his years in this world. Joseph Valachi had begun his crime career at the age of that is 13. From then on, he had been involved in various petty crimes till he graduated into serious crime and soon enough became an underling of Lucky Luciano and Vito Genovese. Of these, Lucky Luciano hardly knew Joseph Valachi, and by that time Joseph Valachi was a senior member of their family. This Lucky Luciano had already been imprisoned, put to prison, and deported to Italy. Now, Joseph Valachi was actually very close to this second boss, Vito Genovese. Vito Genovese, along with his associates, was neck deep into the drug dealing and narcotics business. Joseph Valachi was no exception. He helped Vito Genovese establish a vast network for narcotics smuggling, and that is precisely the reason why both of them, along with their own associates, were arrested and sentenced to this stiff 15-year sentence. But here, Vito Genovese began suspecting the same Joseph Valachi, who was just a mere soldier in the family, of nailing Vito Genovese and getting him imprisoned in the Leavenworth State Penitentiary on a 15-year sentence. Vito Genovese began suspecting that this Joseph Valachi had suddenly become very close to Lucky Luciano, his own arch rival. What happened after this is something that we will discuss in my next video. This is all I wanted to talk about in this particular video. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk on this subject in this video. Please give me your own expert opinions, thoughts, ideas, and views so that I may blend everything together for the sake of this society. Before concluding, let me remind you that I am also a published author with Amazon Kindle and paperback. I write on spiritualism, fiction, and assorted subjects. Spiritualism happens to be my favorite subject. Till we meet in my next video, it is good morning from TSV Raghavan.